Hi everyone, my name is Jack. I want to talk about the longitude problem in John Harrison. I want all of you to imagine yourselves in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's the 17th century. You have no maps, you have no GPS. Your only point of reference is really endless ocean on all four sides of you. And your only hope of survival is going to be basically spotting a speck of land in the end of a spyglass. So that's the environment that we're talking about, the 17th century. So I'm going to talk about the longitude problem itself. I'm also going to talk about the political infighting that stifled its solution, its adoption, and I'm going to talk about John Harrison and how he changed navigation forever. This story itself is going to show the power of human perseverance, of human ingenuity, and it's going to show how the technologies of yesterday are really important for the technologies of today. I've researched the historical records of the Royal Museums in Greenwich, that's in London, and also Dana Sobel's 1995 book, Longitude. So to understand the significance of Harrison's invention, I'm going to talk about the longitude problem itself. So longitude is a really hard problem to solve in the 17th century. Latitude is pretty simple. Latitude's the ladder. It's basically splitting the Earth this way. So the equator is a pretty easy way to split the Earth. You have the North and the South Pole. And sailors, even back to the 12th century, can determine their latitude by using the position of the sun and the constellations. But longitude is something that you need to determine by east-west. That means you need to determine it by time, because the sun sets along an east-west vector. So you need to determine what the time is at your departure point, and where your time is where you are in the middle of the ocean. So there's a really interesting story. This is in 1707. A bunch of British soldiers actually died off the coast of the Scilly Isles. This is off the coast of Spain. 2,000 people died. And this is in the 1700s. This is at the point where the British government was basically at its height. So the British were like, okay, we need to determine how to determine longitude. We cannot have any more soldiers die. So in 1714, they posted a really sizable reward. It's 20,000 pounds to determine a method of longitude. It's a really sizable sum at that point. 20,000 pounds is millions of dollars at this point, in today's money at least. So this caught the eye of a young carpenter. His name was John Harrison. So he was a self-taught machinist, and he spent decades perfecting this clock that would keep perfect time. It's a story of clock making, really. No other clocks at this point could keep such perfect time in humidity, in temperature change, and especially with the rocking of a ship. So he took decades to perfect it. And the last one's called the H4. It's around this size, around the size of a softball, and it kind of resembles a pocket watch. And it was used on a test run to the West Indies, and it kept basically perfect time, so they could determine what their longitude was and what their latitude was. So he should have won the prize by any measure. But the problem was, despite his objective success, Harrison had to fight really hard against the Board of Longitude and the British scientific community to prove his clock was the best solution. The Board of Longitude, it was a series of astronomers. They were all self-taught physicists, and they were astronomers. They were basically people that mapped the stars, and they said, no, we're going to determine longitude by using lunar timetables. So the moon also revolves around the night sky, and determining where that position is in the sky can also determine longitude, but it takes a lot more scientific formulas, a lot more math. Whereas Harrison's clock was just here's the time at London, here's the time in the middle of the Atlantic, you compare those two, and then you can get a perfect time. But they didn't want to give it to him. But it wasn't until King George III's intervention that basically Harrison would be paid the reward money and recognized as the man who solved the longitude, decades after presenting the admission to the board. The Royal Observatories note that the king tested the clock himself, and he actually pressured Parliament to release the funds in 1773. So after the Crown adopted it, it was actually really further improved, miniaturized, and mass-produced. And for a time, the British actually had basically a monopoly over maritime dominance. So I hope you guys have now learned the longitude problem and how it showed that open sea travel was so dangerous. We showed how the carpenter's invention basically solved a nearly impossible centuries-old problem, and how a political struggle nearly kept him from being acknowledged and rewarded. So what I want you guys to take away from this, because of Harrison's determination, explorers could finally navigate the world with confidence. So the next time you check your phone, next time you check your Maps app, I want you to remember that Carpenter's clock what made the difference between shipwreck and survival.